Hello, Algebronians. How's it going? Hopefully well. Today's another quick lesson. We're going to continue to add on to some of our properties of real numbers. Just to recall, we have talked about the commutative property, which deals with reordering equations, the associative property, which deals with regrouping equations, and the identity properties, which tell us that if we add 0 or multiply by 1 to anything, that it does not change. Today we're going to introduce two other properties, and then we'll be finished with the properties of real numbers. The first property is the zero property of multiplication. Again, this is something that most of you know and most of you realize, but just for the sake of putting it into a property and learning it in algebra, we're going to go over it. This tells us that the product of any number and 0 is always going to be 0. So anything times 0 is 0. Pretty straightforward. The second property today is going to be the multiplication property of -1. So this tells us that the product of any number and -1 will give you the opposite of that number. Notice I said opposite and not the negative of that number, because you don't want to use the word negative if that number happens to be negative, because in this example here, if A represented -1 and you had -1 times -1, you wouldn't say that it equals -1. You would say that it equals the opposite of -1 or 1. Remember, the opposites of a number are just the sign. So the opposite of -1 is 1. The opposite of 2 is -2. All right, so the opposite of is telling us that there is a negative sign in front of the value. So it's important, again, it's important to think of this negative sign as the opposite of, because we don't want to get confused if that variable represented a negative number. So here are just two quick examples. All right, if I have some lengthy equation, doesn't matter what this means. Okay, xy squared plus 3 minus 4 to the 5th minus zuw. If that whole thing is times 0, our answer is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. If we have something like the ab squared times -1, we want to say the opposite of what we're multiplying by -1. So we're multiplying ab squared by -1, which is why I place it in parentheses, because we want to think of that as one term. So the opposite of this whole term, which is ab squared. That's it for the lesson. I told you it'd be quick. If you have any questions, feel free to see me. Make sure you complete the question attached to the lesson as well as the CYU. Good luck, and I'll see you guys soon.